Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I've got a story here sent to me by a lot of people, but it's a story I've heard many times before. And this happens all the time. And so this story is actually sourced to TikTok. And normally I'd be very, very leery about putting a story on here and saying, yes, we got this from TikTok originally. But this happens so often, I've got no reason to doubt this story. So this is from the dailydot.com. Braden Biela wrote this. And the headline says, I've never heard of that before. Woman says dealership asked her to return her car a week after she bought it. And the reasoning behind that changed several times. But a recent car buyer and TikTok user named Brooke is having an interesting issue. After buying her 2023 Kia Telluride about a week ago, she received a phone call from the dealership and they said they want the car back. So my husband gets a call last night that the lady who owned the car previously wants the car back. And I'm sorry, but I've never heard that before. She says in the video, which has over 8 million views, according to her, her husband insisted that that was not their problem and that they owned the car. Salesman said that he could provide them with a similar vehicle, an offer that they decided not to accept at that time. So she called her dad, she called her uncle. Her uncle apparently is a dealer, and neither of them had ever heard of this. And so she said then she started trying to figure out what they might be trying to do. She said, we seem to think that maybe they gave us too good of a deal on the car, and they're looking at like their end of the month, and somebody's getting in trouble because they sold the car for less than what they're supposed to. That's a possibility, but she comes up with some better ones later on. Regardless of why it happened, she's not a fan of what they're doing. You don't call the new owners of the vehicle and say, we have a problem. We don't have a problem. It sounds like you have a problem. And that's true. And I've talked before briefly about yo-yo sales or spot deliveries, where a dealership will put you in a car and say, yeah, you've been approved for financing, and call you back a day or two later and go, your financing fell through. You got to come back to the dealership, sign new paperwork at a higher interest rate or pay more for the car or something. And in some states, that can be legal if it's done properly, but in many states it's not. And so I've sued car dealerships before who, when my client said, I'm not bringing the car back in, I'm going to keep making payments on that original note, they quote unquote repossessed the car, which is basically auto theft. And see, they think, hey, we got the car back, we win. It's like, no. After you get the car back, you get served with a lawsuit. Then we see you in court. Then we'll see who wins. So from there, the story gets even stranger. According to Brooke, she then received another call from the dealership saying they would give them the same car that they'd already bought for the same price. But it's like, well, wait a second. Then can't I just keep this car? So he told her that the older woman had bought a car at the dealership to trade in for the car that we have, but the car was electric with all kinds of new, super technologically advanced stuff, and she doesn't like it, so she simply wants her old car back, which again would be somebody else's problem. That ain't your problem if somebody has seller's remorse. She said, I'm over here like, that's weird. If she wanted her old car back, you would just say, well, we can't. We've already sold it, which is what they would do. Here you can buy a new car and trade your one you have now that you don't like and get a new one, right? Like that just makes sense. And then she came up with another theory. What I'm thinking what happened is they sold this car prematurely. They weren't supposed to. And the woman is threatening them. Well, that's probably not it either. So she's talking to all kinds of different people. And then finally, somebody figured out what most likely happened. And what most likely happened is this. The vehicle was brought in on trade. It was brought in on trade with a lien still on it to a lien holder. And the person traded the vehicle in. They said, we're going to give you this much money for it. And implied in that transaction, but also written out in the documents, is that they're going to pay off the lien so they've got it free and clear and they can then sell it to somebody. And dealerships and brokers and just people buying and selling cars will oftentimes take a vehicle in, say they're going to pay it off, and they don't pay it off. And so if you sell the vehicle before you've paid it off, there's a problem because you can't deliver good title to the new buyer. And so if a dealership does that, they've got a problem. If a broker does that, they've got a problem. And if anybody who's not a licensed dealer or broker does it, they've got a problem also. And I suspect that's what happened here. That is that woman brings her vehicle in. It's probably got a big old lien on it, but she wants to get into something else. They say, fine. They then tell her what they're going to pay her for this vehicle. They put her in that vehicle. She drives off. They got this gigantic lien that needs to be extinguished. Meanwhile, she comes along and goes, I'd like to buy that car. We'd like to sell you that car. And somebody sells her the car before realizing, oh, the lien wasn't paid off. But the answer there is quick, pay the lien off, because you really shouldn't be doing that. And I've mentioned before that I've got friends who are brokers and I got friends who are dealers. And in fact, I was at the Autorama yesterday walking around with one of my friends who is a broker. And we were talking about stories like this because these things happen in that industry. Now, a reputable broker or a reputable dealer will make sure that the vehicle is paid off before they sell it on. But a lot of times it happens where some dealership, especially a smaller one, some places not run that well, has issues keeping track of who owes what to whom, and they've got bills to pay, mouths to feed. And so they go, okay, we're going to pay this lien off on this car before we sell it. The lien's $10,000. How are we going to do that? Don't have $10,000. Well, we could sell the car for $15,000 if it'll sell for that, and we'd still get the $5,000, and then we take the 10 to pay off the lien. Except, of course, that happens to be the same day the landlord comes by and goes, you guys owe us $10,000 in rent. If you don't pay us our rent, we're going to kick you out. So which is more important now, paying the rent or paying off the lien on that car? And so I've mentioned before that in most states I've heard of, but in Michigan where I'm very familiar with how these dealerships operate, they are supposed to be keeping such careful records of every vehicle on their lot. There's a thing called a police book. And the police book is a nickname for the inventory system that they keep that has to be available for state inspectors on no notice. A state inspector could walk onto your lot tomorrow morning at 9:01 and say, let me see your police book. And it better be available to show up to them. And the police book will show how many vehicles they currently have in inventory. Then they go out and walk the lot. And if they find all the vehicles out there and no more, you're good. If there's missing vehicles, does that mean you sold a vehicle and forgot to record it in your police book? And then if the vehicle is on your lot in your police book, do you hold the title to it if you're a dealer? If you're a broker, are you holding a title to it that is not in your name, but you have it in your possession to show whether or not there's a lien on it? See, when you go into a dealership like Brooke did here, most states, you'd get to see the title. And then a bunch of paperwork gets done, and the paperwork then gets sent to wherever your titles are done in your state, most likely near the capital. And so I know that in Michigan, they'll open the deal folder, pull out the title that the person trading the vehicle in had. And I've seen these transactions happen, and they pull the title out, and it says right in the face of it, lien holder, first lien holder, second lien holder, if there is one, and then first lien holder, and you, okay, where's the lien termination statement? And if you've ever bought a brand new car, made payments on it, and paid it off, you get a lien termination statement, which is a little document that goes with your title to show that there is no lien anymore. And so what you can do while you still own the vehicle, if you want to, is take the lien termination statement and the title into the Secretary of State's office, the DMV, and have them issue you a new title with the lien off, unencumbered. Or if you want, you can simply hang out the lien termination statement, bring that with you to the dealership, show it to them, and they go, oh, okay, we got no lien here, and you're good to go. So if you're buying a vehicle and it has a lien still showing on it, you got to stop and go, okay, hang on a second. What's the deal with this lien? Because the purpose of the lien recording system is to put people on notice that there's somebody else out there with an interest in that car financially that might be superior to yours. So if you buy that vehicle and it's got a lien on it that wasn't extinguished, the lien holder, if they don't get paid, can come snag the collateral to cover their interest in that car. So when you're at a dealership buying a used car, look at the title, assuming it's a state you can do that in, and see if there's a lien on it and make sure the lien's been extinguished. There should be a lien termination statement or equivalent. So it's not something I hear about every single day, but I hear about it often enough. And more often than not, it's a small dealership someplace on the edge of town handling a small number of cars, and somebody's running the place doesn't know how to do the books properly. The bills don't get paid, and then they go, okay, we'll sell this car to her. It's still got a lien on it, but we'll extinguish the lien as soon as we sell another car. We'll take the money from this, and you see that's almost like a Ponzi scheme because you're borrowing money from one deal to pay back the money on another deal that's already happened. And pretty soon you're 5 cars back. And so I suspect what happened here, and again, I'm just going off of reading between the lines and some other stuff, is that somebody brought a car in on trade. It had a lien on it. Dealership said, we'll take care of the lien. And then they sold the car before the lien was taken care of, and they weren't in a position to take care of the lien immediately. And there's a problem, because if they submit the paperwork to the state going, we want you to retitle it in Brooks' name, can't do that till the lien's terminated. But here's the other problem. They can't show the vehicle as being sold if an inspector were to show up, for instance, and yet the car's gone. And so if anything else, they simply needed to have the car on their lot because they couldn't sell it. Because the lien wasn't taken care of. That's what I think was happening here. It's a crazy story. A lot of people sent this to me, and, we're so used to the idea you go to a dealership and the transaction happens smoothly. And 99.9% of the time it probably does. But every now and then you get a wacky one like this. And I've mentioned before, one of the first early articles I wrote for Opposite Lock, a sub-blog on Jalopnik back in the old days, was about a client of mine who went into a dealership, bought a car, gave him a down payment, they gave him the paperwork, he drove off the car, and a week later they called and said, we need more money from you. We need more money. You didn't put enough money down. And he goes, sorry, it's not my problem. And they kept harassing him, so he called me and goes, what do I do? And I said, just keep making your payments and skip it. I did use a verb and another word, but they were different. And they repossessed his car. Tow truck showed up and hauled his car off. And we called the police and said, hey, title, we own that car. And the police said, well, they claim that they're repossessing is you owe them money. And I said, there's a problem there, right? Because how could we owe them money? They're not a lien holder on the title. And my client's a title owner. And then they pulled the old, well, this is a civil matter. And it is, in fact, a civil matter, which we sued them for. And we won. And I've heard of dealerships that do that as a regular business practice. They just shake people down for more money. Well, you didn't sell a car today? Fine. Call somebody up you sold a car to last week and get more money out of them. Wow, what a bizarre business plan. But I do understand that spot deliveries are allowed in some states. I'm not saying they're all wrong. To give you an example, let's suppose you went car shopping on a Sunday, and you're in a place where car dealerships are open on a Sunday. And you go into the dealership, talk to the finance manager, and he says, I can get you a loan. I can get you a loan all day long at a good rate. He's so confident that he can get you a good loan, he writes up a loan document that's in the name of some bank someplace. And he fills it all out, and he signs it, you drive off in your new car. Come Monday morning, when he submits the paperwork to the bank comes back and goes, we don't like this guy's credit. We do not want to approve this loan. The guy goes, you have to. The guy's already left the car. Bank goes, that's not our problem, that's your problem. So in some states, they can have you sign a document saying, I understand that this is conditional upon the approval being made by the bank in the future. And in the states where that's legal, if it's done right, it can be okay. But the typical example I used to hear all the time, and I hear it less lately in Michigan, was where somebody says, I bought a car, put money down, it was a weekday, drove off in the car, even made a payment or two. Dealership called and said, you still owe us money. Did my check bounce? No. Why would I owe you money? We weren't supposed to sell the car that low of a price. It's supposed to be sold for more. You owe us more money. And I always want to go, does that ever work? Does that ever work? And I think it might when they repossess the car. And yes, I will continue using the air quotes for repossess the car, because just because you call it a repossession doesn't make it one. A repossession implies that you've got the legal right to do so. And you don't. Not in those situations. So this is a crazy story, but that's what I think happened. So if you're buying a used car from a small lot, make sure they do that paperwork right. Take a good look at the old title. I've spoken to people before who went into a dealership and bought a car and somehow got out of there without noticing that they'd signed the back of a title back in the old days when they were front and back and you signed on the back. And the front of the title was orange. And in Michigan, they're normally green. And orange is a rebuilt salvage. So you want to take a good look at the title. You might learn something extremely important. But Braden Biela wrote that for the daily.com. I've never heard of that before. Woman says dealership asked her to return her car a week after she bought it. And she had some theories. And it seems to me like what I explained at the end was probably what happened. And I think that's the same conclusion she drew as well. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. They're sure housework won't kill you, but why take the risk?